This evening's address by President Ramaphosa promises to steer the country back on a track and focus the country on the work that lays ahead. But what tone should Ramaphosa strike later this evening, and what should his message, particularly to investors and the business community, be? Joining me now is Geoff Blount, who's the MD of BayHill Capital, Thabile Wonci, who is the MD of the Black Management Forum, and Danie, who is advisory partner at Citadel. Thanks so much for your time, gentlemen. I mean, we were commenting off air that there hasn't actually been this much excitement, particularly amongst the business community, since we heard from the late President Nelson Mandela. Well, his preferred candidate has finally taken the seat, and perhaps we start off with you. I mean, Geoff, your wish list for President Ramaphosa later tonight at the SONA.
At the risk of sounding a bit cliche, I think that he just has to do more of the same. I think he's been acting as a more statesman figure than a president in the last few months, and I think that we need to just see that. If you saw this, the ceremony yesterday where he got sworn in, there was a lot of dignity, there was a lot of pride in that, and I think that we need to have that. Now we need time for statesmanship in South Africa. So at the top level, I'd suggest that's what I'd wish for. It's just a dignified, respected evening. And then at the practical level, I think that the signaling that he's going to have to give is he going the middle ground and almost the compromise route, or is he going to go the whole hog potentially with the cabinet reshuffle? Does he announce it in that who stays, who goes? And then the third level is what does he signal? Up to the NEC elective conference in December, he had an 8-point plan, which he used, and it was actually a very attractive, good plan. Now we need to see, does he follow through on that? So it's a big ask, but I suspect that right now there's a halo effect, and I think that will be a good evening. But
I think it's not a big ask, because we are in a really tough spot. So he knows this, he took it on. So yeah, we need to ask him these things. But from the Black Management Forum's point of view, what do you want to hear the president say?
On top of our heads is transformation, that's first and foremost, which has been on the back foot for some time. And corporate, of course, has got to rally in his government's cause in terms of steering the economy forward. And then secondly, the issue of governance. We can never falter on that anymore. We have seen where governance has been trampled upon by some of our own, some within government, some within business. I think a much firmer stance on that. And then the other thing, the economic ills. We have been downgraded, and that speaks, of course, to the economic muscle of the country, which is something that this government has got to deal with decisively. And then the ills that have always been prevalent in our economy, such as the inequality, as well as the unemployment, because those are the drags. In whatever try that you are doing, or whatever cause that you steer your government towards, if we are still on the back foot in terms of inequality, in terms of high rates of unemployment, you might find that your interventions are not as effective. And then perhaps the other thing to mention, which is key, is certainty when it comes to policy. Is certainty when it comes to policy. I don't think his government has got too much liberty to dilly-dally or to play, the games that you have seen again. There's got to be certainty, because with that you are giving assurance to capital markets as to where the country is at, and obviously with that you are hoping to see the FDI streaming into the country, and that's what we need.
I mean, talking about flow streaming into the country, I understand that some 40 billion rand has come in to our capital market since Ramaphosa's election in December. I mean, Danie, yes, apologies for that. He hasn't said anything, but we've seen what him being sworn in as president of both the ANC and the country has done to the markets. Yes. So I imagine that you can't be asking too much from the man, because your client should be happy right now. But in the event that, you would want to see more gains and you would want to continue seeing these kind of returns we are seeing on our stock market, what would you want him to say?
Firstly, I concur with both what the gentleman just said now. But I think if we apply our mind back to where they were in Davos earlier the year, at the end of last year when he brought out the New Deal plan, I mean, what's nice to see is he's singing from the same hymnal sheet. And if everybody can sing from that hymnal sheet, I think we set for him an amazing 2018 where we can possibly turn South Africa back into the starlight of the African continent, which will be very, very special. I think the things that he has to focus on is to give policy certainty, as was mentioned earlier, to clean up state-owned enterprises. That's what we're seeing with the Eskom board at the moment. So things are happening quickly. And a lot of people or commentators have said it won't happen as quickly as expected, but we see things that are happening. And if that is maybe in expectation of Moody's possibly downgrading us later this year, showing that we can stand together and we can make difficult decisions, I mean, that's what I need to see from the speech tonight. Confidence, poised as a president should be, making the difficult decisions and executing on what they've promised through the National Development Plan, Davis' speech, and the speeches delivered last year.
No, for sure. And I'd actually at this stage just also like to introduce the COO of Outa, that is Ben Theron, who also joins us in this discussion. Ben, thanks so much for your time. I mean, there's talks about what route Cyril takes. I mean, does he take the middle ground, or whereby, you know, he currently keeps the current administration in the hopes of, you know, pleasing both parties, or does he just start completely on a blank slate? And I know you've got views on the cabinet reshuffle that has to take place. Perhaps elaborate further.
He cannot lose the momentum that he's built up over the last few weeks. He's been absolutely phenomenal. Just before he left for Davos, he started fixing up Eskom. There are other state-owned entities that need to be fixed. But it doesn't help you fixing up the state-owned entities in terms of the board and the senior management. The ministers, the cabinet members responsible for these are absolutely critical. Lynn Brown has been a total failure. There's a number of ministers that need to be replaced, and unless he does that, he will not have a cabinet he can trust, and he's got to be able to surround himself with people he can trust. But Thabile has absolutely ruined the social development and SASSA processes. Faith Mutambe absolutely ruining the public service. Zwane in the mining sector. Gigaba with the finance. Those are just a few of the names that we believe should just be plucked out, replaced with competent, decent people that we can trust. The one thing Cyril has given us is hope. He cannot now falter. He must continue that road so that he can keep this country on the hope that we have.
No, you're not alone in actually saying that Cyril should appoint his dream team of people with a lot more credibility. But the thing is, we do have a ratings assessment that is looming, and it's a question around timing now. Should a cabinet reshuffle happen before the budget next week?
It's a tightrope. You can choose not to cabinet reshuffle for the sake of continuity. But what is the continuity for you? What you're going to have continuity in terms of poor performers and an underperforming cabinet. So I actually think that if he doesn't maintain that momentum, that's where the risk of the downgrade comes from. It's actually if he actually acts proactively and pushes the momentum. I think the real tricky one is going to be about Minister Gigaba, because it's a week before budget speech. So whoever he replaces is really going to be reading he's going to be reading Minister Gigaba's speech, essentially. It's very hard to now come in and quickly re-engineer the budget process. And I suppose that will be the test case, is actually, does he have the continuity of the minister and then in 2 weeks' time replace the minister, or does he bite the bullet now? And I suspect some of that is to do just, again, with the internal politicking within government and within the ANC, as to, is this the clean sweep, or is there some kind of compromise route? I think markets and investors don't want to see the compromise, but you know, who knows what kind of deals have been struck in the back office, if you could call it, for the way forward.
And as the BMF, I mean, should he strike now? And if he does, I mean, do you have possible candidates that you think would be, you know, good to have by Cyril's side as he takes South Africa on this path of being on a new dawn?
Should he strike now? Ideally, he must strike now, given what the country has been subjected to over the past few weeks, over the past 10 years. We have dropped the ball, and quite significantly. The economy has experienced a downgrade. I mean, in my lifetime, I'm living through that now. The confidence, the business confidence, is also at an all-time low. There's a huge need to fix you know, our SOEs, which have plummeted, you know, when it comes to profitability, you know, operational efficiencies, etc., and so forth. So there's a huge need to do that. But I guess the question is, do you strike it before the budget speech or not? And what is it that you want to achieve if you strike now, right? But what should he be giving us? direction, right? In terms of fixing, number one, SARS, you know, or all these key regulatory institutions, you know, we've got to defend and protect those, including the SOEs, the board, you know, the caliber of the board that we nominate as government, or government nominates, you know, or appoints. It's got to be credible leaders, you know, that will share the same kind of interest and desire and affinity to see our country progressing. So we certainly don't have someone in mind, and we believe that he must strike, but the urgency before the budget speech, there's nothing that really justifies that. There is a need, obviously, to clean up, which actually it's one of those things that as the BMF we're going to put forth to say, you know exactly where our weaklings as a country have been. There's so many leakages in these ministries, and this has got to be fixed, because we can never afford those ills moving forward.
I mean, Danie, Cyril has reiterated that radical economic transformation is something that he does stand by. And there always surveys that are listed on JSE-listed companies that, you know, haven't done enough to address the issues of transformation. So in the event that, right, okay, we know that RET is not being taken off the table. I mean, are you expecting him to perhaps outline strategies on how RET could better be implemented?
I think what the market will want is, from an investment management perspective, we prefer clarity to matters. So when you throw a curveball into a discussion point and you don't know how that would fall out with the people interpreting what you have said, if you can clarify exactly what you mean to achieve social economic development, to increase social inclusion within the economy, because the long and the short of it, you need to increase the tax net. If you keep that very narrowed in the minority of this country, well, then you're going to have increased taxes every time, and people that are very wealthy can afford to leave the country. Whereas we need to maybe just look and realize that this is more of a process about building brand South Africa again. I mean, we came out of a very difficult history in apartheid 1994, and we need to move forward from that, but we need clarity, we need certainty, and that's what I'm looking for the speech tonight again.
And you know, building brand Cyril, or brand Cyril, has been built on anti-corruption, so cleaning up the entire house. But at the same time, brand Cyril is trying to balance unity within a very fractured party. Would you forgive him if part of the deal that got President Zuma to eventually step down was immunity from the criminal charges?
No. If you provide immunity to number one citizen, the just past number one citizen, everybody in this country will believe that they can be untouchable, and all they have to do is make a deal later on. You have to make an example. You've got to draw the line in the sand, and Jacob Zuma must stand trial. He must be in the dock, and hopefully he'll go to jail. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of money that's still out in the field that must be repatriated, and you cannot repatriate that money if suddenly you have a deal on the table.
But for the sake of peace, because obviously Jacob Zuma is not the only one who criminal charges could be laid against. But for the sake of peace and moving the country forward and getting the 5% growth that he wants and building or creating the 1 million jobs, for the sake of peace.
Under what conditions does immunity to Jacob Zuma give you those advantages just given? You cannot do that, because corruption is the one thing that must be addressed first of all. Secondly, the SOEs must become engines of this economy. Radical economic transformation can happen without radical actions. If you have jobs for all, there's economy that's flowing, 5, 6, 7% growth, this country will fly. But giving Jacob Zuma amnesty will not give you that.
Guys, we are out of time. I thought if we can just wrap it up. I mean, in the next, we've got a minute to share amongst ourselves. Just in 1 minute, and I'll start with you. If you just wrap up your SONA expectations for tonight.
We're hoping Cyril will give a clear light and a clear path where everybody's involved. He will involve the country, and he'll give hope for this country, because that's what we need so desperately now.
Hope. Danie?
I couldn't have said it any better. Trust, clarity, make South Africa great again.
Make South Africa great again.
The affinity and commitment in addressing the economic ills, and also addressing the plight of black professionals and executives, you know, that are excluded from mainstream economy.
For sure. And Geoff?
Creating national dialogue and unity. We need to go back to the era of '94 of a coalition government, a national vision, and then implementing that. to address all of the factors that you've agreed.
No, for sure, for sure. I agree 100% because the unity needs to be garnered not only at the party level but also as a country level. We need to stand together a lot more. But thank you so much for your time, gentlemen. Thanks to Geoff Blount, who is the MD of BayHill Capital, Thabile Wonci, who is the MD of the Black Management Forum, Danie, who is advisory partner at Citadel, and of course, Outa COO Theron.